Now, look, can I just ask you first about the big news over the last 24 hours or so, which is that missile attack, missile attack, sorry, a Ukrainian missile attack on the conscript training college at Makiivka. Now, the Russians have admitted, haven't they, to 89 Russian soldiers having been killed in that strike. The Ukrainians say that the number is vastly bigger than that, maybe even be 800. But on the Russian side, and we're hearing what happened here was that Russian soldiers used their mobile phones, and that helped the Ukrainians target their missiles. Just explain that to us. What happened here, General?
All the indications that I've seen, and it's on open source stuff on intelligence on Twitter and the like, suggest that the Ukrainians are responded pretty quickly, having picked up Russian soldiers logging on to the Ukrainian mobile system. The Ukrainians picked that up very quickly and were able to direct a devastating HIMARS long-range missile strike against the Russian site. I think it's worth saying that these are legitimate. This is a legitimate target. These were Russian soldiers. They have invaded Ukraine, and they were hell-bent on either attacking more Ukraine or defending more of Ukraine. And so this is entirely justifiable by the Ukrainians and set against a context in which Ukrainian civilians have consistently continued to be targeted, murdered, and struck by rockets from the Russians. This is entirely justifiable, however grim it is. And in terms of the casualties, all the indications are that the casualties are way in excess of the 89 or so that the Russians are admitting.
Yes. Is it significant then that the Russians have admitted at least to 89 Russian soldiers having been killed in this strike? I mean, the Russian missile destroyer Makiivka was sunk. Russia was reluctant to admit that anything had happened and played down the number of casualties here. Here, they're saying 89 deaths, and those responsible on the Russian side are going to be punished. What is the significance of that? Because it is a big change of tone.
Well, it's an admission by the Russians that they've had a defeat. They are trying to to bound this. They're trying to ensure that this does not cause more humiliation for Russia than it will do. And they're desperate to demonstrate that this has not been the catastrophic defeat that the Ukrainians have inflicted on them. But that's not going to wash, frankly. And the Russians are looking, incompetent. The fact that their battlefield discipline, their level of training is not up to controlling the use of mobile phones in a war zone, which is pretty basic stuff. And the fact that their strategic communications is frankly so inept, all indicates that Russia is very firmly on the back foot.
Yeah. When we talk about the tone that's being taken by Russia now, there has been one, hasn't there? Just again over the New Year period, we've seen Putin himself out there praising the deaths of Russian soldiers and the sacrifice of their lives and the sacrifice of their families, which is a change from before. What does that mean to you? Some are saying that could mean that Putin is now contemplating a really long haul when it comes to this war.
Well, number one, Putin is absolutely considering a long haul, and we have to assume that we've got to be prepared for a long haul. And the so what out of that is that we've got to knuckle down. This thing is not going to go away, and the way to stop it being a long haul is to give the Ukrainians the offensive maneuver and military capability that they need, give them the ammunition they need, and give them the support they need.
And is that happening, in your judgment? Is the need to respond in the way you described there? Is that recognised?
I think the reality is that the West is still expecting Ukraine to fight with one hand tied behind its back. The Western support has been far too slow and far too little. Yes, the Ukrainians have been given an enormous amount of capability, but until they get the tanks, the infantry fighting vehicles, the artillery, I mean, the Ukrainians, they're talking about 300 tanks, 500 artillery pieces, umpteen hundred other armored vehicles. Without that, the Ukrainians are going to be very hard pushed to really mount the offensive maneuver capability they need in order to retake Ukrainian territory.
Yes.
And that's a long time coming. Plus, of course, ammunition. And if there's one message to get home, the amount of ammunition being used is staggering. The ammunition scales being used completely stymie any assumptions post-Cold War. These are massive Second World War levels of ammunition usage. And the West needs to be tooling up its industrial capacity to really give Ukraine the ammunition it needs.
And from the way you're talking, you seem to feel that that lesson has not been absorbed in this country, let alone other parts of Europe and the Western Alliance.
I don't think it has been hoisted on board. I mean, I'm afraid I think we're so focused on sort of contemplating our internal navels in this country that we fail to recognize the massive strategic challenge that this Ukraine war is posing to the West and globally as well. And this is not going to go away. We cannot put our heads in the sand. We need to really wake up and recognize that 2023 should be the deciding year, and it will be the deciding year if we give the Ukrainians the support they need. And meanwhile, the Ukrainians are taking it on the chin in an extraordinarily resilient way.
Yes. And just lastly, when you say the deciding year, I just wonder what in your own mind, that looks like. And what's the end point at which you would say, yes, mission realistically accomplished?
It's very simple. Mission accomplished when Ukraine has achieved its military objectives, and that means ejecting every Russian soldier from Ukraine. And let's be clear, anything less than that is not going to be full mission accomplished. But to achieve that, it depends on a whole range of variables. Nobody can foresee how this war will go this year. But we can reduce the risk of Ukraine not achieving its military objectives if we give Ukraine the tools to do the job. If China stays relatively neutral, as it has thus far, if President Biden, President Zelensky's leadership, strategic leadership, can maintain the support of the West and Ukrainian people, particularly the West, to ensure that the what you might call the appeasers who are looking for a diplomatic solution, which effectively gives Russia a chunk of Ukraine, can be shouted down.